We're rewinding the clock to 1992 to explore Core, the explosive debut album from Stone Temple Pilots. With raw vocals, heavy riffs, and a sound that rode the wave of grunge while carving its own identity, Core introduced the world to Scott Weiland and company in a way no one could ignore. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Eric, we're right in the middle of year number 5. We're in season 5, like kind of getting towards the middle of season number 5. Yeah. What do you think? Should we Star Trek this and make it a 5-year mission?
Oh, you're looking to end it?
No, just making conversation. We got 5 years, and that's a famous 5-year journey.
Yeah.
Or are we the further adventures of?
I think we could do a little bit more. I think we could squeeze out a little bit more. Sure, why not?
There's plenty of music and movies out there.
Mm-hmm.
More than 5 years worth. So there you have it. You heard it here first. 5 years plus. We're going to keep going. And
like the Energizer Bunny.
The good news is the other 4 years is already recorded. So if you're new to us, you can go check it out. All the 4 years of episodes is already back there. Plenty of stuff to go through. A lot of great. I'm not going to say there's any stinkers because there's not.
No,
right? I mean, every episode's got some allure to it, some nugget of information or something different. And the only way you're going to find out is to listen to them all. And our guest today has only listened to 3, so he's got another 76 episodes to go. Mr. Christopher Clark.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm really, really excited to be here. I'm very pumped about this record. So
excited to have you, but you got to start listening to more episodes, man. 3 is not enough.
You were on more than 3 episodes, Chris. So you should at least listen to the episodes that you've been on.
I did listen to the ones I've been on. Yes, I've listened to many.
That's why we have him on so often, to keep the listenership up. We know he's going to listen to it.
I'll listen to myself. There you go.
Listen to it.
Yep.
Welcome aboard. It is so great having you with us. Mm-hmm. As always, Chris brings
always great to be here.
His formidable music knowledge to bear on our episodes, and we love him for that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
If you want to continue the conversation with us, you want to tell us your thoughts about STP and Core and what was going on at that time, you can hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, and or YouTube, any of those social media outlets. We are there monitoring 24/7, monitoring those different social media accounts, ready to reply. So, or you can send us fan mail right through. It's called fan mail. Right through your podcast, wherever you're listening to the podcast, there should be a message us button in the show notes, and you can send us something direct there. We won't be able to respond to that, but you can just give us some feedback, which we always appreciate. Always a good thing.
Indeed. Yep.
Indeedy.
One word.
Yes, indeedy.
Indubitably.
Boy howdy. Right. That's from Cream. Is Boy
Cream
Howdy
magazine? Great magazine.
Yeah. Cream was like the Hustler to Rolling Stone's Playboy.
The anti.
They were like Cream was a little grungier and a little dirtier, and
Well, you had Lester Bangs doing a lot of stuff, so always a good time.
Yeah, and they always had like the centerfold, like they literally had like a centerfold, like a poster or a pinup that you could take the staples out, and it would be like a Bruce Dickinson or Gene Simmons with blood all over his face.
Yeah, it's something really raunchy looking.
Yeah, and then the back page would also be like a picture of a group and stuff like that. So Cream really did cater to the to the rock fans. They just kind of gave people the stuff they wanted. It was a good magazine.
Yep.
I don't. Is there an online version of Cream? I
think they relaunched it. I know the son, the founder's son, owns the rights. I think again.
Okay.
And they did a documentary a few years ago. I don't know if it's online or what it is, but I do know he started it up again in some way. I'm not sure how.
Yeah, Cream and Hit Parader. That was another good one.
Hit Parader was huge when I was a kid. That was one I read all the time.
Yeah, those were like
Circus.
Where we got where I got a lot of my music information back then. That was like getting the newspaper for like music fans. It was like getting the paper. I'm going to go get the papers. Get the papers.
If we didn't have how much it cost at the time,
go to the library.
You go to the library. You sneak into the store, and you're just reading it while you were in the store. Hey.
Yeah.
Are you going to buy that or what?
I
got what I needed. Thank you. And it would just be.
Well, they actually would have a copy machine, so for 10 cents you could run off the articles too. I have when I was cleaning through my stuff, I came across like photocopied articles from magazines, because
that's awesome.
I couldn't take it out, so just Xerox copy it, and then take it home and read it. So anyway. We're not going that far back in time with this album. We're going to 1992. What Eric and I were talking about was a lot further back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Than 1992.
Yeah.
But not too far back. But this was, let's give you the stats on Core. Because it's an interesting, STP are an interesting band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. For sure.
Kind of didn't get, at the time, didn't get their due, but I guess we'll go into it. But this was released in September of 1992, produced by Brendan O'Brien, which is very interesting. All lyrics by Scott Weiland, except for Creep and Plush. Those are co-writes. Mm-hmm. There were 3 singles released from this album. Sex Type Thing hit number 23, Plush hit number 1, and Creep hit number 2. But those chart performances are the mainstream rock charts, not the top 100. Right. So those are there's like 50 different charts. But those 3 were on the mainstream rock charts. Number 3 on Billboard, 8 times platinum.
It was huge.
It's a monster.
Yeah, it was.
That's no joke. We'll take 8 million out the door. I mean, that's a heavy hitter.
Yeah.
I'm curious. How many copies did the first Pearl Jam in comparison?
I think it went diamond, but I couldn't swear to it.
Okay.
But
we'll find out right now. I'm tapping away, and I will pull up that info. Let's see. Certifications. Guess how much?
I'm going to say at least 10.
You're right about at least 10.
15?
Chris? Not quite 15, 13.
Okay.
We're figuring it out.
Not too shabby.
No, not at all.
So I think 8 million is, you compare that to 13 million. I mean, I don't know what Nevermind, I'm sure is, the other album, that comes up in the conversation. And that's just off the charts. No, actually in the United States, 13 also.
Yeah.
So, and that's interesting. We'll just take a little side ramp. That at the time, Nirvana was so much more well known than Pearl Jam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the fact that those albums matched each other in sales is just weird, because Nirvana is known as kind of the wellspring, and and they were very much like Stone Temple Pilots, embracing MTV. As subversive or as whatever they did with the videos, they were still like doing that image for MTV where Pearl Jam had shunned it. They're like, we're not making videos. Here's some live footage. You can use that for something. They did a video for Jeremy, but after that, they really eschewed making videos.
They didn't make a video again. I don't think until Do the Evolution, which was on
when Todd McFarlane did the animation for that.
Yeah.
So for it's interesting for a band that really was the antithesis of what MTV was looking for. They matched Nirvana, and Nirvana was known as the monster. But STP is right in there. I think pretty much. Tell me if I'm wrong, either one of you. But when we talk about this era, I tend to think of 4 bands, maybe a 5th to a lesser extent: Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, and Alice in Chains. The 5th, to a lesser extent, is Soundgarden. To a lesser extent.
And then you got Smashing Pumpkins in there too. You got to remember that's around the time of
but are they in that same...
Melancholy was a big record, man.
It was, but from this kind of sound, these 4 bands or 3 bands.
Siamese Dream for
kind of
sure.
are emblematic
Yeah.
of a certain sound. You know, Smashing Pumpkins are a different subset of that. They have
A
this
little bit
whole
more
other sound.
artsy.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
I mean,
That's
Perhaps,
not.
dare I say, a little bit more proggier
yeah.
than these bands. But I think like Siamese Dream and like that definitely had that grunge.
I mean,
feel.
if you those were the big bands. Like everybody, pretty much everybody listened to, like, at least where I went to high school, pretty much everybody listened to those bands and like various. And you always had your favorites, but you kind of listened to and appreciated all of them.
Yeah.
And I also make the argument, I think Smashing Pumpkins kind of like put the crack in the door that Nirvana then kicked open with.
Really?
Gish came out either the same year or the year before, and I think got people talking. And I think they kind of like laid some of the groundwork that Nirvana was then able to exploit when they signed with Geffen and put out Nevermind. I mean, both records were produced by Butch Vig. So
yeah, Gish came out in '91.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I think Jane's Addiction and Smashing Pumpkins don't get enough credit when it comes to like setting off the alternative revolution, because they didn't. Sure. Like I said, I think they laid the tracks that Nirvana then drove the train through. Train through the wall with. So
and just for our subjects. Stone Temple Pilots, they were formed in San Diego in 1989, so they are not part of the Seattle scene.
Nope.
No.
As much as they're lumped in because of the time when they kind of exploded, where all this stuff seemed to be popping at once, this new sound that was squarely not the 80s hair band. It was squarely not that type of production. Like something happened in 90 or 91 where these new bands were coming up unbeknownst to each other with this different sound. So in 1989, in San Diego, this group was formed. They were known originally called Mighty Joe Young.
Yep.
And that was up until this album.
Mixing of the record. Yeah.
Yeah. This album was released in September. Up until August, they were still known as Mighty Joe Young.
I think they even had like
found out. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think they even had the cover set up and everything else. They were ready to.
Yeah, I mean, this was ready to go, and then there's a blues artist called Mighty Joe Young, and they're like, guys, gotta come up with something. So they were inspired by the STP motor oil. Well, they had the initials before they had the name. They're like, they were so enamored, like that is really catchy, STP. Yeah. We just got to figure out a name now to plug into it. So it wasn't they didn't have Stone Temple Pilots. They had STP. We know we like that. What's going to be the name? And they kind of ran through a couple of things. They always had like Temple Pilots or Pilots in there, but they were the oil company was the impetus for that. And yeah, talk about like changing your identity.
Can't get
like
grungier than that.
No. We're Mighty Joe Young. I mean, this is the band we're recording. Here comes our debut. It's like no, got to change your name.
Wow.
And I know they get kind of lumped in with the grunge era and all that stuff and all of those bands. But what's interesting is that a lot of people don't realize is that Dean is the older brother. Dean was already in his 30s when this record dropped, and Rob wasn't too far behind him, if I'm not mistaken. And just the idea that like they, as much as they kind of get lumped in with grunge and the alternative and the Seattle sound, they were almost like too metal for the Headbangers Ball and like too not alternative enough for 120 minutes. And like, to me, like they're just a rock and roll band. And what I think is great about them, this record has a lot of the elements of like their influences. Like they're both big fans of Yes. They're fans of Led Zeppelin. They're fans of a lot of punk music. Like I think there's a lot of those elements in there. And I think what was unfair for them at the time when this record came out is they really got lumped in as like a Pearl Jam clone because the timbre of Weiland's voice was very similar to the timbre of Eddie's voice, but like they were a lot more unique. And as no two records of theirs sound alike. Like I think their first four albums are, and this is just me as a fan of the band, I think those first four records are fairly flawless and no two of them sound alike, and they're not afraid to experiment. And I think there's a lot more, Pearl Jam had a sound, and that was Pearl Jam sound. Like if you listen to Tiny Music and then listen to Core, they're two brilliant records and they're two completely different albums. And like, that's what I think is so unfair about the fact, like the critics slammed this record and they were labeled as like these Nirvana and Pearl Jam clones, and that was it. And it really, to me, is like an unfair thing. And it's only now in recent history that they're finally getting some of their due. And they're not cited as an influence the way Nirvana and Pearl Jam are, but you can't tell me that there weren't bands that came after them that weren't influenced by STP. I mean, when you sell 8 million records out the door on your first album, you can't help but be influenced by people. I mean, everybody I knew listened to those records. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah. Let's give some love to the band members, because everybody knows Scott Weiland. Of course, no longer with us. Tragic death of another lead singer from the '90s grunge era.
Very sad.
But like Chris was talking about, you have Dean DeLeo. You have two brothers, Dean DeLeo on guitars and Robert DeLeo on bass, and then Eric Kretz was the drummer. And they pretty much stayed the same until 2013. Until Weiland got fired from STP, they pretty much were a cohesive unit, which was great. Which Pearl Jam was able to sustain that. A lot of these groups from that grunge era didn't make it through. Pearl Jam did. Stone Temple Pilots did in one form. They took a hiatus and other projects, Velvet Revolver, all that kind of stuff. But when they did reform, they were intact. Talking about the Pearl Jam thing, when I first read that, I mean, Eric, are you a big STP fan, casual passing STP fan?
I liked the first this record, and of course, I had Purple. Okay, largely due to The Crow. The movie nerd in me. Soundtracks were a big deal for me.
So, does Core is that a fair assessment of Pearl Jam of Stone Temple Pilots, that their Pearl Jam knockoffs?
Not at all.
I don't think so. I don't. All you need to do is really listen. I mean, I think at a glance, if you're just casually listening, yes. And I think it largely has to do with the fact that he sounds like Eddie Vedder, the same sort of cadence, and but Eddie Vedder, on the other hand, you can't understand half the things he's singing, he's got a very distinct, and that became his shtick, like his thing. Yeah. That's part of their sound. And now they're the STP is far more concise. They're more just sort of, I would cite them more. I think Zeppelin is a big influence on the way the drums and it's not as, dare I say, jazzier, Pearl Jam tend to be. They could go and do these complex rhythms and things like that, where STP was more just churning rock. I mean, it was just a great
balls to the wall,
right, just a good, solid rock album. I mean, both of these records were great.
But then as you get into Tiny Music, which is my personal favorite STP record, that record is very jazzy in spots. There's a lot of elements of jazz, so they can do those things as well. But again, I don't think, to me, I never equated Pearl Jam. To me, they sounded like two completely different bands.
Was that something you think that was influenced by the other bands at the time too, though?
I really don't think so, because I don't think it sound, and I don't think Tiny Music sound. And again, I know we're not doing an episode on Tiny Music, but I don't think Tiny Music sounds like anything that was out at the time either. That came out, was it 95 or 96? There's a lot of stuff on there that I wouldn't say, oh, that's them trying to be Nirvana, or that's them trying to be Pearl Jam. He changes guitars on that record. He goes from using a Les Paul with humbuckers to all of these guitars with single coil pickups. The guitar playing becomes a little bit more clean on those records, and it's a lot more finger picking type of stuff. And as bombastic a drummer as Eric Kretz can be, as you get into some of those later records, he can lean back a little bit and be a little bit more lighter to the touch and a little bit more jazzy and inventive, whereas the songs on Core don't call for that. The songs on Core call for him to be Bonham-esque in a lot of respects. I mean, Wicked Garden, just think of Wicked Garden when he does Wicked Garden.
So it's something that they
big bombastic sound.
Yeah.
So they had range.
They definitely had range.
Which is what you're saying. So
way more range than I think people give them credit for.
Exactly. And I think if you're judging it on the first album, it might be easy to say that. But you know what? Let's just say everything back then sounded the same. You can't tell me that Alex Tate, you can't tell me that Lane Staley didn't have that lower register growl the way that Eddie Vedder did as well. They all had a similar tone or timbre to their voice, right? It's just that kind of the way I was kind of looking at it is like Pearl Jam represents like the anger of grunge, like the real just the anger of just angst and anger. Alice in Chains is more like horror. Like they're like the stuff they sing about is it's dark.
They're the drug band.
Angry, but absolutely it's dark.
I mean,
right? and STP is kind of like right in the middle. They kind of skirt both edges. They could go with some of the darker elements, but then they also kind of deal with some angry stuff. And I think STP kind of, and maybe that was the blessing and the curses. They found themselves in the middle.
Right. Too hard rock to be alternative and too alternative to be hard rock.
Yeah, it's kind of splitting the difference, but Scott Weiland, I look at him almost like a David Bowie, very much a chameleon.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Especially as the career progressed, right? He would, change and not afraid to sing different things where, Pearl Jam evolved. But Stone Temple Pilots grew from this. Like they took the opportunity. Evolving is different than what Stone Temple Pilots did. Like you said, every album they just kind of you listen to Interstate Love Song. It's such a big song that really doesn't have too much DNA from this album, but you could tell that there's a growth there. There's a sophistication that they were learning. Much like the other bands, but in a different way than Pearl Jam. Like I said, Pearl Jam, kind of Eddie Vedder, kind of steered that ship, and his vocal style really drove the thing. But Weiland was so versatile with his vocals, Eric, right? That he just kind of they grew, but in a different way because Weiland could do all these different types of singing.
Yeah, you're right. He can go soft, he can go hard. He can, he's really throaty. And that takes a lot. That takes, whereas, if you've got a certain timbre to your voice and that's the only thing you could do in Eddie Vedder's case, I mean, I don't think there's ever been a time except maybe when he went acoustic a little bit, when he's doing some of his solo work, you got something a little bit more different, something different there. But for the most part, you listen to those records and he's pretty much on par, like just
it's
the
Eddie.
same.
Exactly.
Eddie.
Yeah.
And he's not going to compromise. Right. He's at that point he is what he was what he was, and that was it. Like I'm not going to change. I don't have to, because I'm Eddie Vedder. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I think this band, maybe because of the criticisms, maybe because of they felt the need to at least try to do something different, or maybe people still didn't see it that way. But unfortunately, but like I said, I think it's just a matter of just really listening. Like Chris points out, like you're talking about the different guitars and the different, the instruments that are being used on the records and stuff. We get technical, but I think there is a definite progression there, and this band, I don't know. From my part, when a lot of this stuff was kind of just sort of passing me by, I wasn't really paying attention at the, like we talked about in other episodes. This band I did take notice of. So if I have to say, they were probably it for me, while I wasn't listening to Pearl Jam or, certainly not Nirvana, cause I found the angst thing with, Kurt Cobain a little too much for me at the time, so it was hard for me to listen to that. But I got introduced to the Pumpkins early on, but Stone Temple Pilots, I just liked just the fact that they were just maybe, I'm not going to say simple, but they just had that hard rock. It was just
straightforward.
It was just straightforward, just hard, really good, solid rock, and that's that's to me stems from the 70s. Like there's it was probably appealed to me more because I recognize that a little bit more in the music.
And like I said, that's the thing. I mean, like I said, Dean DeLeo was already almost 31 when this record came out, so he's got those 70s. I mean, he was a teenager in the 70s, so you've got like those influences. Like I just listened to him be interviewed by Billy Corgan actually, he talks about, Zeppelin being a huge influence on this record, but also like yes, they interviewed Eddie Offord. Eddie Offord almost produced the album. Who was, for those of you that don't know, Eddie Offord
Close to
produced
the Edge, and
all the great Yes records, exactly.
Yep.
So there is that '70s vibe in there, and like I think you got that bombastic hard rock, but then you've also got those like quiet interludes and the acoustic guitars in the middle, and then they pick up the pace again. So there's a lot of that like Zeppelin-esque stuff going on.
There's a little bit of bluesy kind of stuff feel to it too, which of course appealed to me. A little bit of slide guitar in there, and you couldn't help but that always gets me. That just sort of swampy kind of sound. I really like that, and it's very, like, again, just very direct and very not over polished, just good solid rock. I mean, it's just good stuff. Yeah.
When I was listening to it today, because I was thinking about the Pearl, all the comparisons that were going on at the time, and as I was listening to the album, I was like, this album actually is almost a masterclass in sequencing for a debut album from an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first three songs like really like make the statement of this is what this album is. Like they put three songs in one after the other that are bangers.
Yep.
Right? Like you get Dead and Bloated, Sex Type Thing, and Wicked Garden, one after the other, and those are just like I said, like in the STP, blueprint for this album, like really well produced. And this album is really well produced, and that's what gives it an edge too. It sounds really great. Everything is clear, even though the guitars are heavy and overdriven. It's crisp, it's clear. The drums really come through. The drum
sound is fantastic on this.
Yes, like this album just sounds really great. So to have those three songs lead, they just charge out of the thing. And I was thinking how important it must be for a debut album. Like, what are you telling people in your first three songs? Like what story are you telling, or how are you introducing yourself to the listeners? Like, hey, we're new. And for some reason, it just hit me that these three songs in a row just really got me going for the album. Like, it's like one after the other. I'm like, I am in like the STP mode now. Like I get what these guys are.
Yeah.
They have a certain sound, and it's like Eric says, it's in your face, it's driving, but it's straightforward. But it sounds great too. So like all the boxes are checked off of not being a challenge to listen to, right? It's like, I'm going to stick with this because it's clearly defined. It's easy to listen to. And it's just it's just that in your face, kind of the way I felt when I first heard The Cult.
Yeah.
The first time I heard the song Love Removal Machine, it was like, this was something that was so clean and crisp and clear. And yes, it was very AC/DC derivative, but it was like, it was right there. It was like, okay, this is here.
I thought of that. Listen, revisiting this, I was like, The Cult. I mean, I could hear that. I could definitely hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. And STP is very, I think this album very much lands like that. Like when it just comes out and just makes the statement.
And then and I think what's cool about the sequence too is, and then like they go into that like little interlude thing, Sin, which some people say is like useless, but to me, I thought that was like, I like those two things. Like, what is it? Sin
Wet My Bed is the other one.
Yeah, Wet My Bed. Like, hey everybody, where did we used to? And when I was a kid, we used to joke about it. Like, my friend Angela, who's a big Stunt Double Pilot fan. I remember I'd walk up to her, hey everybody, where did Mary go? And then we'd like go back and forth. But, so you got that little break, but then you kicks into Naked Sunday, which is still a rockin' song and like a banger, but it's got a funk to it. Like, it's got that that funky guitar line and stuff. So like it's sequenced really well.
Yeah, it allows them to switch. Having that little interlude allows you to switch gears
a little bit. Exactly.
And kind of, it's a little misdirection, right? Because you kind of give this little interlude and it's like, oh, this was kind of weird, and then you go into something different.
Yeah.
Which kind of allows you, and then you get into some of the other stuff. You get into Creep, and you get into some of the slower, different material. And I really, it hit me today. I'm like, wow, the sequencing on this is just really important.
Yeah.
You really want to get that message across early to get people to listen to the rest of the album. And I think that's what, especially Dead and Bloated. I mean, that song has everything. It's got like the Weiland, that deep Weiland growl that he, like, I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because he can sing all this other, he could sing, Sour Girl and Big Empty, right? And he sing all these other types of like songs But on this album, it's that swagger is what it is. It's a different kind of swagger. Like Nirvana didn't have there was no swagger.
Well, there was no front man. Like, Weiland is a front
anger.
Man.
It was raw emotion, right? And Pearl Jam was simmering angst. Like it was kind of like Eddie was like simmering, like if he was like a snake that was going to strike, right? And this is kind of like this is just like the shirt's off, and this is just like Mick Jagger swagger that this album has.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he is a front man. Like, I mean, I never got the opportunity, unfortunately, to see them live, but he was very dynamic as a performer. I mean, you could watch any of those videos. Like, and I remember when they were on Saturday Night Live, and I forget the song that I forget what songs they performed, but one of the songs was one of the tunes he used to use a bullhorn for. So like for him to come out and like, he's doing his moves and he pulls out this bullhorn and starts singing into the mic with the bullhorn. And like, he was very dynamic. You couldn't help but watch him. And like, and he had this really solid trio of musicians behind him that really played very well. That, Eric Kretz doesn't get enough credit as like what a phenomenal drummer he really is, man. Yeah. He's a monster.
Yeah. He's a basher. And, with Core, STP took advantage of the MTV effect, like Nirvana. They didn't shy away from it, and I think that may have helped give them a leg up.
Yeah,
if again we're gonna keep talking about them, but if Pearl Jam was kind of reticent to make videos and to embrace that leaves a gap, right? That leaves a hole for other bands to kind of come in, Blind Melon or whoever, Alice in Chains, to be like, if you guys don't want to, we will take advantage of this. If we can get our stuff out there, so I think that kind of helped, kind of elevate them a little bit, and it probably brought the criticism as well, because if that's all you're hearing, if you're hearing Smells Like Teen Spirit and Plush in heavy rotation, you'd be like, okay, this is a little derivative. Like where are we going with this? But
and it's interesting too, but also, they weren't afraid to be controversial or to write lyrics that might start a conversation. Like, one of the first singles to come out of the record was Sex Type Thing, which the lyrics are from the perspective of somebody who's a date rapist. And he was writing, it was supposed to be a criticism of a, one of those like, meathead jerks that would like, take advantage of women.
Yeah.
But people took it to mean like people took it to mean like he was promoting those things. Yeah. And this was like what he was about. Like, you shouldn't have worn that dress if you didn't want me, and that he was trying to criticize that. And it started a conversation, and that, they say no press is bad press. I mean, people misinterpreted him, but it also got people to say, well, what is this really about? And let me go check it out. And, people that takes records off the shelves back then. Right. So I think that's part of their allure as well.
Yeah. They took that song literally. It's like, well, and I think there was an interview. He goes, come on, like really? Like,
yeah.
Like, you think that's what I'm about, then you really don't know me. So it's kind of, that kind of bad press, like I said, no press is bad press, I suppose.
I mean, but it's unfortunate that people have such stupid knee-jerk reactions to things, but
yeah.
Oh yes.
And the more I think about it, it's kind of like Nirvana's a 3-piece, Pearl Jam's a 5-piece, and STP is a 4-piece. Like I said, they fit like right in between the two. Of the stripped down raw energy, and Pearl Jam's got a little bit more layering because of the two guitarists,
right?
And Core, I think, just kind of hits. It hits different, and in retrospect, now it's kind of getting the respect. Back then, I don't remember that. I only remember that a few years ago, like it could be 10 years ago, but meaning these comparisons. I never back then made those I never thought.
I definitely remember that. I remember when Plush came out. The biggest thing I remember when Plush came out is like everybody's like, "Oh, this cat sounds like Eddie Vedder," like that. And what most people don't remember is Sex Type Thing came out first, and I remember watching it on the Headbanger, because I used to tape the Headbangers Ball on Saturday nights. I remember watching it on Headbangers Ball and being, "What is this?"
Why? Because you had to go to bed.
Because that's why you taped it. Yeah, probably. What was I? 13 when it came out. But I remember watching it, and then I remember it being on Headbangers Ball, and then I don't remember anybody really paying attention. But then when Plush hit, that's all anybody could talk about. This cat sounds like Eddie Vedder. That's an Eddie Vedder clone. He sounds so much like Eddie Vedder. Come on.
Listen to No Excuses by Alice in Chains. You're going to tell me that's not the same.
Right. I mean, and I think it's just more virtue of the fact, like you said.
the same church, maybe different pew, but the same church.
Right. Like it's the same timbre of the voice. Right. Exactly. I mean, and musically, I don't think Plush is musically that similar to, to me, I don't see the connection to them in Pearl Jam, but that's just me. But I remember
not at all. Musically, they're a different beast, especially with 10. Pearl Jam there's a lot of like similar bass work, like a lot of similar bass lines that they kind of, or not exactly note for note, but bass rhythm or bass, sequences that they use that kind of set that album up. And this is just God. The more I listen to it now, I was like, I was into them at the time because I remember when Vaseline came out, when their second album came out, an Interstate Love Song. I mean, it was always on MTV, and it was all I was listening to. It was just like, but I never really bought. I loved listening to them, but never really bought anything at the time. Wasn't until much later, kind of like Eric. I mean, but I was absolutely aware and into it, and I was into the whole grunge thing. I remember. Do you remember the? I'll tell you where I bought the Nirvana CD. I bought it at Alexander's on Central Avenue.
I remember Alexander's.
It was going out of business, and I got
okay. I remember.
I got Bonnie Raitt, Nick of Time, and I think I got Nirvana. I think I got Nevermind.
Boy, what
if I'd only bought the album?
That could make a good evening. Bonnie Raitt and Nirvana.
Nirvana, there you go.
What a double bill there.
That's a double bill that you would see now.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is it's a different sound, and I think we've kind of gone over that.
Yeah.
But the other similarity is Weiland, just like in the other groups, Weiland is the voice. He writes the lyrics, and then the DeLeo brothers, mainly Dean DeLeo, will write the music.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing too, is there's that consistency from the beginning of these words, these thoughts, the style of singing is all provided by the lead singer, which I like. I tend to like that.
Yeah.
And I kind of like when the musicians write the music, because this way everybody kind of gets a piece of it. The musicians, the DeLeo brothers and Eric Kretz do what they do best. Like, we'll write the backing tracks, write your, kind of like the Doors, Eric, right? Morrison would write all the weird lyrics, although they would also write stuff, but he didn't really write music. The Doors were tasked with putting these lyrics to music.
Yeah. The complexity of what they did, was their thing. That's what made them great, is going off and doing their own thing and putting the two together. Well, you got something different. You got something unique, And I don't know if that, you would say STP is as sophisticated as all that, but I would say just from that standpoint, I mean, they clicked. It's a solid band. They know, I think they could read each other. And I think you can hear that in the dynamic.
And I really think a testament to how powerful these songs are is that they do hold up when they're stripped down. Like I still remember, again, going back to the Headbangers Ball, one of the most famous performances of Plush is when they performed it on the Headbangers Ball, and it was just Dean with an acoustic guitar and Weiland singing. And to me, that's almost better than the version that's on the record. And the thing I remember most about that performance is MTV was giving away a record store. So they're actually performing in this record store on the MTV set. But it was a phenomenal performance. And I remember when I was a kid, I wasn't watching the Headbangers Ball for this. I remember fast forwarding through it and then finding out later, oh shit, I have this on tape, because then it started getting radio play. But it's
they were the real deal. They did a version of Dancing Days for the Led Zeppelin Encomium tribute.
Yes.
They did, of course, the Big Empty, which was they do that acoustically, but it was on the Crow soundtrack. So they had the chops. So this wasn't a fly-by-nighter. And Chris, you make a really good point about how this album stands up over time.
Oh, it absolutely.
And I think because it skirts the line of rock and quote unquote grunge.
Yeah,
I think it's got the longevity because it's more squarely a heavy rock album
Yeah,
it's a hard rock record.
What something like Nirvana would be doing, which is just kind of more punky grunge or more punky rock, right? This is more rocky rock. Like you said, it's very, the big booming bottom style drums and those big chunking guitars have much more DNA with stuff in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I think now that's why when people reassess it, they're like, wow, this album kind of really can kind of hit and can kick.
Yeah.
And maybe doesn't sound as dated as maybe some of the other stuff that was swirling around back then.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because at the time when this record came out, Rolling Stone's critics nominated them the worst band of the year. And then the readers poll, the fans voted them the best band of the year.
Yeah, they were the worst and the best.
Yep, worst new band and best new band.
And oddly enough, here's another just great kind of, I think we're making the case for them in this episode. Plush was the 4th most played song in the 90s on mainstream rock radio.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself puts them, for that rock radio stuff, that AOR or whatever at the time was the alternative, whatever they considered the mainstream rock radio, for Plush to be the 4th most played song in the 90s.
That's crazy.
Kind of tells you that, if these guys are a knockoff, if they were a knockoff, that they wouldn't have lasted, because that stuff usually comes and goes. Like it gets revealed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not what you are. You're not what we think you are. Usually those imitators, they'll kind of bubble up. They may have an album or two, and then they kind of sink, right?
Yeah. No,
but these guys made it on their own steam, and again, that it shows and is a testament to their versatility.
And they've never truly made a bad record, especially those.
They're all different.
Yeah, and those first 4 records, like I said, I think those first 4 records are pretty flawless when it comes to their catalog. So
and I don't know if at the time this kind of criticism kind of fueled that, or if they felt like outsiders, because again, you think of all this music, you think Seattle.
Yeah.
And these guys were in San Diego, the chillest place, it probably in the United States. Like San Diego is the least threatening place that you would think of.
It's like Mayberry.
For music like this to come from. You expect it from Seattle, where it's rainy and it's cloudy and it's dour and people are angry just walking around. But these guys from San Diego, where it's sunny, San Diego.
Yeah.
Via Jersey. The DeLeo brothers were
originally from Jersey.
Originally from Jersey, yeah.
Yeah. So I think everybody should absolutely give this album a revisit. Stuff like Cracker Man, also towards the end, like this album does not let up. I mean, the one of the softest songs, you get Creep and Where the River Goes when the album kind of closes it out. But
one of my favorite lines in the whole record, I want to know what the rent's like in heaven.
Well, he found out.
Yeah, yes, he did.
Unfortunately, the guy was, he made a Christmas album.
Yes.
Did he?
His
first solo record's pretty good too. 12 Bar Blues isn't a bad album.
Yeah, and he made a Christmas album with for the most part the traditional sense, like Dean Martin and Bing Crosby kind of covers,
and
with the orchestra. And he performed live, I think, on Jimmy. There's a video of him on Jimmy Kimmel.
I could see it. I could definitely see it.
And he's wearing he's wearing a suit and he's with a full band.
I have to look that up.
I'll find it. And he's singing this Christmas song. It was amazing.
And one of the things I remember is my friend, my 2 friends that we used to listen to STP all the time, my friend Angela and my friend Tommy. My friend Angela was a huge Stone Temple Pilots fan. She had a wall of just Weiland posters on her wall. And she had the single for Sex Type Thing. She bought anything with STP's name on it. Mm-hmm. And on the single for Sex Type Thing, there's a version of Sex Type Thing called Swing Type Thing. Mm-hmm. So it's like a Dean Martin type of song.
Swing version?
It's it's a swing version of Sex. It's actually pretty cool. It's
neat.
The song and those lyrics, but it's done Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin would have done it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
So that they had that in them even then.
Yeah. I think he, we got a lot. He was with us for a long time, and he did make it out of the 90s, whereas some, Lane Staley and Kurt Cobain did not. Andrew Wood from Temple of the Dog.
That was really upsetting.
Mother Love Bone. did not. But he certainly had his share of problems, which led to kind of just a wild life. Now there is a. I'm gonna have to get the bell. We haven't had the bell in a while. There is an ELO connection here.
Is there really?
There's a Scott Weiland, Jeff Lynne connection here.
I don't even know this.
What?
Nope, I'm not aware of this, man.
Come on. Well, if we're talking about Scott Weiland covering artists and doing Christmas songs, well, Scott Weiland covered ELO. Velvet Revolver did a version of "Can't Get It Out of My Head" on Libertad.
See, you know what? I never listened to that second album. I gotta go back and listen to that.
They did a version of "Can't Get It Out of My Head." So Slash and all the boys, 3/5 of Guns N' Roses were there.
Matt Slash and Duff.
They did a heavier version of "Can't Get It Out of My Head."
And his voice, like I could hear him doing Jeff Lynne, man, with his voice. Absolutely.
It's not the I am.
Yeah, no.
It's not that voice.
That's not his only voice either. That's what people don't realize.
That's the thing is when you're gonna imitate him, that's what you do. Like that. It's that voice. It's that weird low voice.
But he can go high. Like he does have a higher range.
Like I said, Sour Girl. I love his vocal performance on Sour.
Oh, that's an amazing song. That's one of my favorite STP songs.
Yeah, and it's a weird video with the Teletubbies with fangs.
Oh, yeah, it's bizarre, yeah.
And they're like running around and they have like fangs, and they're
God, the Teletubbies.
Sarah Michelle Gellar is in it, and she's like alive or dead or something, and it's weird, but that was the 90s for us. So.
Well, no, that one was did that come out in the 21st century? I forget now. Yeah.
Was it 01
or 02? I think. Yeah.
Jeez, no, that was
number 4 by STP.
It was number 4 is 1999.
1999. Okay.
Yes, so they made it right at the end.
Yeah.
Because they made 5 albums. No,
6 with Weiland alive. Then they've put out some stuff with Chester Bennington and the new guy David Coots.
Yeah,
and it's interesting
too.
And
Chester Bennington too.
Yeah, well, it's kind of unfortunate. And in the DeLeo brothers, they did. They actually tried to work without Weiland because I guess it became really strenuous to work with him. So they put out like records with other musicians, but it was always those core 3 guys. It was always Eric, Rob, and Dean. Like they put out a record called Talk Show. And that was the name of the band, but it was basically STP with another singer because they were trying to escape Weiland, but Weiland, for all his demons, I mean, there were very few like him. So they're almost stuck with him.
Yeah. It's very, very unique. Especially with those, that was the chemistry. And I forgot Blind Melon too, Shannon Hoon. They all had this problem of the lead singer passes away, and they did not really have success with getting replacements. Lane Staley has a particular type of voice as well. Mm-hmm. Shannon Hoon from Blind Melon had a particular type of voice as well, and none of these bands were able to kind of AC/DC it, where it's like, let's get someone in here who can.
Alice in Chains came close, I will say that, and I forget the guy's name, William Duvall. They've put out some records with him. The one that they put out, the first one they put out, I think it's called Black Gives Way to Blue. It's a really good album. It actually went gold. You're talking the 2000s, so going gold might as well be going double platinum at this point.
Yeah.
But and I've seen them live with him. Like he's nothing will ever be Lane, but he's close, and they do put on a really good performance. Yeah. And apparently the guy that STP has now, they're playing the New Jersey Performing Arts Center in a couple weeks, and
didn't they just
apparently pretty good too? So
didn't they just reveal also the 3 members of STP, unless it was another band, that they made an album back in 2013 that's coming out now?
It's possible
that they recorded an album with, kind of like what you said, they recorded an album with somebody else as well, but they never did anything with it. And they're gonna release it now. It's finally gonna come out. But talking about Lane Staley, the guy, he's like, there's something about him that draws me to him. His vocals are so creepy.
Oh man, so good.
The way they're double tracked, and like he.
I just found what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. In 2013, Rob DeLeo and his brother Dean DeLeo, along with singer Pete Shoulder and drummer Brian Tichy, who is plays with like a lot of the hair metal guys, recorded an album that has been kept secret until recently. The band has now announced they will re-release this album under a new name, One More Satellite, with a debut album set for release on July 18th.
There you go.
So
those DeLeo brothers, you can't keep them down.
Nope. And they do a lot of different stuff. There's a record, I can't remember the name of the band, that Dean did with it was mostly instrumental music except for one song with John Anderson from Yes singing on it. And it's
really,
it's very it's a lot more ethereal and like,
there are flutes in it and
like psychedelic type of stuff. And then he sent John Anderson an email with a copy of the song going, I would love it if you'd sing on this, and like, very heartfelt letter. And John Anderson emailed him back with vocals on the track and goes, thank you for sending this to me. I had a lot of fun. And then that was the opening track on the album. And I can't think of the name of the band off the top of my head, but yeah.
Wow. I don't think you can get two more polar opposites than Scott Weiland and John Anderson.
Yeah.
The Leaping Gnome.
It also kind of speaks also to Dean's how dynamic Dean can be, though, right? So, yeah, I just
the Leaping Gnome.
he's really short. I'm sorry, John Anderson. He's like,
he is. He's a very tiny guy,
and he's got a really high voice. So he's almost like a
hobbit.
Cartoon. When he was young, he was almost like a cartoon character.
Yeah, he's a hobbit. But I love him. He's
he's great. He's the only guy that sounds, his voice when he talks sounds the way that when he sings. Like exactly.
This is true. Yeah.
So. Yeah.
All right. Getting back to Core, which the album. The title of the album and the album cover is inspired by the Garden of Eden. On the cover is Eve holding the apple, and holding it out, for temptation. Obviously, core is what's left of the album. So what are we talking about? I mean, Eric, what on here is kind of the ones that really do it? I mean, there's a lot on here. You could almost say everything, but there's everything standouts. Everything.
It's like, well, I like. I love Naked Sunday. Like you say, the first three songs kind of just put you there. Plush, of course, but I really like Naked Sunday, and I do like Where the River Goes. I like the way it ends on that note. But no, I mean, it's a solid record. And I went back and listened to it again. And it's an album that I didn't really think about, and I'm glad you brought it up to do, because I kind of, wasn't really listening to STP, but now, I've been listening to it for the last 3 days. So now I'm going to probably go listen to Purple and then go on from there. And a couple of the albums I don't even know, like I haven't even heard. So, Chris, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
So,
you would really like Tiny Music, Eric.
Tiny Music, sure.
I definitely think that's in your wheelhouse for sure.
Yeah.
And for me, like, this is one of those Wherever the Needle Fall records, but like, as far as like songs that go beyond like the singles and the videos that were on MTV, I think, Piece of Pie and Sin are two really amazing songs. They're really well constructed. And like Eric, Naked Sunday might be one of my favorite songs on the album. And when we were kids, I just remember Where the River Goes was always a standout for us as well. Just like lyrically and just the performance was so good. Like there's really not a bad track on the record.
Yeah. On songs, Tiny Music had, Big Bang Baby and Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart were kind of like the big
Lady Picture Show.
Yeah, Lady Picture Show was another one. Those were kind of the big ones.
Yep.
And then what album is that song with the Days of the Week? Is that Purple?
That is Shangri-La Dee Da. That's the one that came out after number 4. And then after that one came out, that's when they took a hiatus for a while until
Days of the Week. That's a pretty good song too.
Yeah. They put it, and that's a cool video. There's a cool video for that one too. And then shortly after that was the self-titled, and then Weiland couldn't keep his shit together, so they finally had to like.
And in between that was a couple of solo albums and 2 Revolver albums too. So. Yeah. For me, I'll go Dead and Bloated. Because, like I said, as an opening track, it's just almost terrifying. Yeah. It really kind of it's almost like a slap in the face. Of how heavy it is, and just kind of and the way he's like, I am just like just really kind of putting it out there with his vocals, like really like belt it, like singing with velocity, like almost shouting the lyrics.
He sings with such force, like the opening part before like the music kicks in. There was a video of him. I remember watching it on MTV. There's a video of him. The opening of that song is him screaming so hard into the pickups of a guitar that it's picking him up that clearly that they were able to record it. And then when the music kicks in, that's when he goes into like a regular microphone and full vocal.
Yeah. So I'll go Dead and Bloated. Of course, Plush is like one of my favorites. It's like from the 90s, easily will make it in there. Piece of Pie and Cracker Man.
Yeah.
Just to kind of do something.
How did I know you were going to pick Cracker Man? I don't know.
I said it earlier, but yeah, no, it's just got that heavy, like, again.
No, I get it, but it's just like
when this kind of music is, when this kind of music is done good and it's produced well, there's nothing like it. Like when it's crisp, and I love guitars that have like a start and stop. Like I love that,
Yep.
Zeppelin was really good at that, right? That start and stop of like a heavy guitar sound, and then it stops, and then it, like
riffs,
with pauses, and that's what this album like harkens back to me too. It's just kind of like listening to that kind of stuff. It's reminiscent, but it's obviously something different and new, and a part of this burgeoning scene in the 90s that, again, someone must be able to explain it. We certainly can. How all this happened in concert with each other, all these different bands deciding not to be 80s style, right? Not to use 80s technology, and to have this similar sound. And then they all came up at the same time, which again, to me is just, I don't understand it.
I think it's, I think personally it's indicative of people getting sick of like the hair farmers and the guys who are just talking, out to like, make poppy metal records to like
White Lion.
Yeah. Like I like White Lion, but to get like Tramp. Well, Vito Bratta is a phenomenal
guitar.
But I think what happened is you got so many second-rate versions of that shit that people were finally like, let's move on. But then you also have these bands, they're not just influenced by like Zeppelin and hard rock. They're also influenced by that punk aesthetic of stripping it down and not, you're not getting on stage to like be all glammed up and that kind of stuff. It's, let's prove it with our music and with, play real rock and roll, not this like, overproduced crap. So,
although he was the only one, I was thinking about that too, how all that glam stuff kind of got left behind in the 80s, like all that kind of stuff. But Weiland was the only one to embrace that, a little androgynous, not afraid to wear makeup and to kind of explore those different aspects. And I think that's what made them different as well too, is his,
Yeah, but his glam was more Bowie than it was David Coverdale, which is why I think it's like, you know what I mean? Like it was a little more, to me, it was a little more authentic. Not as much bullshit.
But none of the other artists, they were doing the flannel, and they were really the antithesis of that. But he was still, he pulled from some different influences. That's why I said in the beginning too, he was very much in the Bowie mold of that. Yeah. Of that chameleon of changing his looks, even though as he got skinnier and skinnier, not in a good way.
And while we're on that aesthetic, honestly, the other thing, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. If you ever look at Rob during that period, my man, he dressed like he looked like a dad from the 50s. He was always wearing like the slacks like you'd see like on like a dude in Leave It to Beaver wearing, and like the 50s looking button down shirts. Yeah. Like he had that like, rockabilly, like, 40s or 50s, like, swing looking guy. Not, he wasn't dressed like a rocker ever. Like that was his look.
And like, Dean as well, like has slick back hair, right? And kind of.
Well, Dean was a little bit more of a 70s looking guy. It was Rob. It was the slick back hair and
he looks like he belongs in Huey Lewis in the News.
Yeah, exactly. That was Rob.
He looked like Mario Cipollina. That. It was but.
And that's all that part of the image too. Is like you're looking at these guys and you're saying that they are reminiscent of something that we're very familiar with, and and maybe that was part of the appeal, at least for me too. It was like these guys aren't too way out there. They do have a certain, and I for one like the fact that Weiland, I don't know if he is a Bowie fan, or if they've ever crossed paths or, that kind of thing. But I'm thinking Bowie from like the Berlin trilogy period, like, with the orange hair and the,
absolutely
the turned up collar, and like he was, sort of punkish, but Weiland had that going.
And they like to have fun too. Like I remember when they played Roseland on Halloween, they painted themselves. They dressed like Kiss. They came out and they performed the whole show dressed like they were like, well, we're in rock and roll. Let's have some fun with it. Like there was, and this was a time where, Dirt, as amazing as an album is, it's a drug album, and how fucked up we are on drugs, and we're falling apart, and this is how drugs have damaged us. And Kurt Cobain was a year away from killing himself. These guys were not that. Well, Weiland was obviously a party guy, but like they were there to have like, we're a rock and roll band and we're going to have some fun with it. We're going to be serious about our music, but we're also going to enjoy it while we're here. Like there was that element of STP as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They didn't seem to be too hung up on the success factor either. I mean, I don't know. Do you guys, is there
they used to joke about
talk about it? Like, Eddie Vedder had such a disdain for, like, he's infamous for that, right? I mean, and then of course, Kurt Cobain too was not, wasn't used to the success, and he didn't know how to deal with it.
But they
STP kind of, they kind of came in and they kind of, I guess, embraced it, I guess, in a way, but
it wasn't like they were like pissing away tons of money or living like, on TV with big mansions. But I remember, again, MTV that was on all the time, but I remember watching MTV and they were like, it was like Stone Temple Pilots on tour or something, and they're flying in like a Learjet. And I remember Weiland going like, well, it wouldn't be, we got to make it like Led Zeppelin. And how can we make it like Led Zeppelin? Like, we got to have a shot of us on our plane. It was like, they were taking the piss out of it. Like, it wasn't like they didn't shy away from the fact that, 8 million records will make you a lot of money. Like, but it wasn't like they were also like, again, it wasn't like a Motley Crue video either. So,
Right. Yeah, I think probably the biggest example is the excess is what happened to Weiland.
Yeah,
is the addiction. I mean, he struggled with it for years and went through rehab so many different times. In the end, it got him. But that's usually a telltale. Pearl Jam was able to avoid that, and maybe what they did was correct by shying away from that, not not letting themselves be too exposed to it. Kind of insulated them, and kept them kind of, I'm sure there was issues, they had some issues. I think one suffered alcohol.
Mike McCready had a pretty bad drug problem.
But, but as you see with the other bands, it was heroin all the way. That
all of them,
took these guys out in the 90s. It was like the drug of choice.
It's very sad.
Weiland made it through the 90s and kind of soldiered on, but eventually, it got him. So, but the album is Core from 1992 from Stone Temple Pilots. And they've got a great discography. And like I said, the Weiland Christmas album is, swing, reggae, bossa nova. He does it all. You got to give the guy credit. He was not a one-trick pony. He had a lot of different facets. Unfortunately, he's known for, his demise and the circumstances surrounding that. And we want to make sure that this album Core is not forgotten. And the rest of the great STP discography, as Chris has said, is just all of its good stuff. It's all an evolution, which was great. They didn't stand on here's our formula, we're going to beat it into the ground. They took those opportunities and evolved into some great music that really shaped the 90s. I mean, they were throughout the 90s part of the soundtrack. They kept on having stuff that was out there and on the radio. And
these records are a time machine for me, for sure, man. Memories of driving up and down Yonkers Avenue, listening to this.
Yonkers Avenue. That's where
listening to this in my friend's grandfather's car. The band I was talking to Eric about a second ago or a few minutes ago was called Trip the Witch, and it's like as much as Scott Weiland's got some good solo stuff too, the DeLeo brothers, they put out a lot of stuff that kind of falls under the radar. And Trip the Witch is very different from what STP does, but also very interesting because it's, again, a little more psychedelic, a little bit more ethereal, like that kind of stuff. It's definitely worth checking out.
Okay.
So, and it's mostly instrumental.
Alrighty then.
All right. We'll look it up.
I think that's going to do it then. What do you think, Eric? Put a bow on this one. Christopher Clark. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Get off this podcast and listen to those other episodes that you're not on.
You put him on the spot. Put him on the spot. Little awkward.
I'm going to be like, what's his name? Hunsaker in Lethal Weapon. You owe me. You owe me, Roger.
Yeah.
You listen to all those episodes. You can do that. You're the police.
You could do.
Listen to them, Roger. Listen to them all.
There you go.
And he's going to keep going if we don't.
Yeah, we will. We're going to
keep going. So,
thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Eric is going to be on his comfy couch. I'll be here in my comfortable gaming chair until we see you again. And the hint is every Thursday new episodes come out. So just set it and forget it. Save it on your favorite podcast provider, and you will get notified of when those new episodes drop. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon. So for Chris, for Eric, this has been Dean. We will catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.